theoretical plan for this is I'm going to talk a little bit about the geology, the people, sort of the people history of the Galapagos, and then the birds, very briefly, and then Holly is going to cover everything else that's alive. I didn't leave much. So with that, I mean, why did we end up down there? And the answer was simple. It was our honeymoon. This was one of our top 2 choices, and this is where we ended up. That's the boat we cruised on. It was a total naturalist cruise. You know, with naturalists telling us all about stuff. They were a little iffy on the geology, but the biology they were pretty good on. There were 10 guests, 10 tourists on the boat, 7 crew. It was amazing. We got lucky with this cruise ship, and I put in there the value of networking. I met a guy at a conference that does research in the Galapagos. I called him up and I said, hey man, you know, vaguely remember me? Sure. You know, my wife and I are heading to the Galapagos. Got any advice for a tour company? And his response was, go with these people, or go with these people, or go with these people. Don't even look at anybody else. And they had as good a reviews online as anybody else. So what the heck? And it turned out to be just kind of an amazing experience. It's a whale skeleton. It's a couple of ribs set up. And that was the official honeymoon photo. All right, moving on to rocks. Now, the Galapagos has 18 main islands, 3 smaller islands, and 107 rocks and islets. And each island, except for Isabella, is a single volcano. Isabella is, I think, 7 of them, kind of glued together. The oldest island is about 5 million years old, and the newest ones are still forming. So we still have active volcanism on the 2 westernmost islands. We take a look at the big picture. That little dot right there is the Galapagos. It sits on the Nazca Plate, which is heading to the east, slamming into the South American Plate. It's very close to the Cocos Plate, which is heading to the northeast, and that's got a little bit of relevance as we carry on. Much like the Hawaiian Islands, we're looking at hotspot volcanism. So for whatever reason, there's a plume of hot rocks in the mantle heading upwards underneath the Galapagos Islands. Meanwhile, the Nazca Plate is heading off to the east, so the old islands are further over here. The hotspot doesn't move, the plate drifts over it. The other thing that's interesting is that the hotspot used to actually sit on the border of the Cocos and the Nazca Plates. So what we end up with are 2 undersea ridges. The Cocos Ridge right here and the Carnegie Ridge here, of which the Galapagos are here. So picture, if you would, this spreading center boundary a little bit further south. And we've got a series of volcanoes coming along here and heading this way with this plate, and a series kind of heading off this way with this plate. And the Cocos Islands somewhere up here are an old volcano created by the same hotspot that is currently creating the Galapagos. Now, because I love Google Earth, we're going to Google Earth. Everybody in my class is now groaning. You can see the Cocos Ridge heading off this way and the Carnegie Ridge heading off this way. Both are being subducted as they hit the South American or Central American continents. But if I kind of zoom in a little bit here, try to turn a few things off that we just don't need. All right. The data for the Galapagos is a little bit iffy. So I'm going to zoom in on Fernandina, I believe. Give it a little bit of a tilt. And you can see each of these volcanoes with a large caldera. Isabella, that's a function of, we got an ice volcano right here, another one right here, here, on our way down. and so on and so forth. A nice one right here. One of the things that's interesting, that's fairly obvious, is that the precipitation patterns on the islands are based primarily around elevation. And if you see the green, it only really appears towards the top of the volcano here, where you actually, on most of these islands, you head into a cloud forest. Very wet, ferns, mosses, dense vegetation. Whereas down here towards the ocean, it's a barren scrubland. So, yeah, we can see some smaller volcanoes, for example, here and here and here. Little one right here. For those of you that just heard me 20 minutes ago, parasitic cones. A little flashback. Yeah, all the other islands, the older islands to the east, you just don't see the volcanoes as well when zooming in on them. They're worn down, they're just a bit beat up. And eventually they'll be eroded away and disappear under the ocean. All right. The other thing I wanted to make just a quick note of was caldera collapse. And we actually traveled to one of these locations. If I keep zooming in, there we go. Zooming in, zooming in. We've got two spots right here where a void formed, right? Magma pushed up and then it cooled and kind of settled back down, left a hole. Ma nature hates holes. So they collapsed inwards. And we did a hike. This is all cloud forest up here. I do believe that my next slide is actually one of those two. And it looks pretty big. And when you look at it on Google Earth, you zoom in for 10 minutes and you finally get there. But nice little caldera collapse features throughout. And you can see the vegetation here. It's mostly ferns. There have been historic eruptions. So the last 500 years or so on 8 of the Galapagos volcanoes, and the most recent eruption was in 2009 on Fernandina, which is the one farthest to the west. A little bit about the people. Right. There's some evidence of pre-Columbian use on the islands, but no evidence of actual habitation. So the best guess is some people got blown off course, 600 miles, and ended up out here, and then eventually headed home. So we have really no evidence of actual habitation on the island really until the 1800s. The first recorded visit was 1535, and you can look it up. Some bishop was on his way to do bishopy things in Peru, ended up on the islands, and ended up kind of describing the islands in the biology. So this is where the Galapagos kind of got on the radar a little bit. The first known map that was drawn was in 1684 by some buccaneer. British, they all seem to be British. In fact, for the next couple of hundred years, the history of the Galapagos is a British history. So we've got buccaneers, we've got pirates. All the islands got English names that were the standard sort of until now. Because it wasn't until the 1800s, and I'll get to that in a second, but hideout for English pirates up into the 1800s. In the late 1700s, the whaling industry picked up in this area, and this became a convenient place for whalers to stop, meet, etc. And almost ended up causing the large tortoises and fur seals in the islands to go extinct. Okay? Tortoises are easy food. They move about this fast, and they're big. You can see them. Just head on inland, pick them up, and you're done. In the early 1800s, a post office was established. And this is worth noting. This is the current incarnation. It's a barrel on the beach. And you put your mail in it. And then you shuffle through the mail that's there to see if any's going where you're going. And they're still doing this. We left a postcard that has not made it yet. Okay. And each of us ended up taking some back. We took one for somebody in Seattle. And it's been an icky winter, so I kind of put a little note in it, put it in the mail. So it got from the Galapagos to Ellensburg the old way, but it made it over the hills the new way. The funny thing is this postcard right here says, deliver this postcard and you get a bottle of wine. Deliver a photo of this postcard in front of the post office and we'll buy you dinner. So this was heading to somewhere around Denver, which was where this couple was from. So they got dinner and booze coming out of this. 1832, Ecuador annexed the islands, became part of Ecuador, and they, of course, gave everything Spanish names. So now and there's apparently still kind of a competition for whether you use the British names or the Spanish names, just because the English names have been used for so long. At this time, people started moving out there. You know, penal colonies, farmers, etc. Never very many people, but this was when people started heading out there. The tie to Darwin days in 1835, Beagle and Charles Darwin arrived. Charles was primarily a geologist at the time, and apparently based on observations on the island, he gave the first correct explanation for volcanic tuff. He also, I had to add that he took a lot of notes on plants. And he was into the mockingbird. He took notes on the mockingbird. He took no notes on finches while he was there. This is kind of, we all think of Darwin and his finches. Well, he got all of his finches. He hired people to go, that were going through the Galapagos to shoot them, in the good Audubon tradition. You know, dry them or preserve them in salt or whatever they did. Mark where they got them and bring them back. So when you hear about Darwin working out his theory of evolution, and the finches are always mentioned, they were actually an afterthought. He got back to England and went, wait a minute, there are these little birds that are really annoying and hard to photograph. Whereas the mockingbird would just kind of hang out. They just kind of check out, see what you're doing, pose for a picture. Mockingbirds were great. We head into the 1900s, and in the 20s and 30s, we had some European immigrants heading in. There was some kind of an incentive program. And if you're curious, there was some drama. And they made a movie about it in 2013. So if you're interested, you can learn about the drama with the Duchess. Baroness. Oh, sorry, Baroness and her dancing donkey. Don't ask. During World War II, the U.S. actually had an airfield there. We built the airstrip that's still used in World War II. It was part of our strategy for protecting the Panama Canal, which isn't too far out. Obviously, the air base is still in operation. And in fact, without that air base, I don't know if there'd be much in the Galapagos right now. The Japanese also sunk a ship right off the Galapagos. If you go to Google Earth and you turn on ocean and kind of zoom in, you can find that out. Random trivia. Most of the islands and the surrounding area are now some kind of a park. It was established in '59, the centenary of the publication of The Origin of Species. The Charles Darwin Foundation was established then. They do a lot of research on the islands. As you might expect, biologists from all over the world flock there and look at all the birds and beasts and what's going on and everything else. Tourism started in the early 60s, and interestingly enough, the company that we went with happened to be one of the very first. They've been in business since the 60s doing this. In '86, the whole area was designated a marine reserve. At the time, it was the second largest protected area in the world. It's now ranks at number 14, but nonetheless, it's a pretty large area. Some interesting trivia is that the main conflict that's happened in the Galapagos in the last, 50 years or so, has actually been over sea cucumbers and the fishing thereof. Delicacy in Asia. Apparently there are a lot of them there. We'd have Asian ships coming in, you'd have the locals fishing them, and overfishing. The Park Service stepped in, said stop. The locals said, no, this is our livelihood. Ever heard of that before? It happens all over the place. Apparently got a little bit exciting, and things have all settled down since then. So if we take a look at the islands, the little tiny yellow bits are the parts used by people. So much of it is, Puerto Ayora is right here, the main port. The airport is actually right up here. There's one road wandering through here. But part of Santa Cruz, just a little bit over here on Isabella, a little bit on Floriana, and a little bit on, I think that's San Cristobal. Otherwise, there are no people, except the occasional biologist running around. But you find them everywhere. Okay. Made World Heritage Site in '78, Biosphere Reserve in '85. And one of the things that I find interesting was that in 2010, it was actually taken off the list of sort of super endangered sites. They've done a pretty good job of doing things like killing the goats that had kind of taken over a few of the islands, getting rid of introduced species, and just kind of protecting the whole place. So it's one of the few places in the world that has actually sort of improved in protection status. Now, I'm going to, really quick, about 25,000 people on the islands, so not that many. And if I just drop out here, the main population is in this little town right here, Puerto Ayora, and then you can see this little swath of agriculture around the volcano, and that's it. Now, there's a road that kind of goes through the middle of it and comes up here to the airfield, right here. And a little base right there. Zoom out a little bit more. There's a small town somewhere, yep, right there. And by small, there can't be more than a couple hundred people, tops. They're using parts of this area. Floriana, yeah, 10 people, maybe 20. And a road that goes in here, and there is a little bit of agricultural use up here. We went into there on one of our tours. And then, to my surprise, the capital is actually over here, which is the second largest place of 700 people. And they actually have an airfield as well. That was put in at some point. But very, very sparsely populated. All right, I'm going to skip the biology for a minute. We'll go on to the birds, right? Okay. There are quite a few birds. They're pretty cool. Some of them are they're things you'd see right around here. Great blue heron, for example. What's that doing here? The Galapagos. I see something I've already seen. I turned into a total bird nerd. I had to have pictures of everything. Had this super zoom camera. It was really bad. And we still hate finches. I suppose I should start with them, but I'm not. All right. We'll start with the top predator, land predator on the island, a hawk. The Galapagos hawk, and a couple of pretty pictures. It kind of looks like a hawk, flies like a hawk, acts like a hawk, eats things. The one that was cool was the short-eared owl that actually operates during the day. So it's not nocturnal, whatever nocturnal is, I haven't been able to figure out the word. Diurnal? Okay. But we ran into a couple of these. We actually got really lucky for the birds and the animals. Our guides would be like, today we're going to see some iguanas, a few albatross, and if we're really lucky, you'll see one of these. Every time we found, no, the one thing we didn't find were seahorses on Seahorse Day. But we saw like 4 owls that day. And between this owl and the hawk, they are like I said, the top land predators on the islands. No talk would be complete without boobies. There are 3 species of booby on the island. The one to the side, to the left, are the Nazca boobies. Then we've got the aptly named red-footed booby, which is weird. They perch. They've got these stupid duck feet, and they actually nest up in trees and perch, and it just doesn't look right. And, you know, you should have talons or something, not webbed feet in a tree. And then, of course, we have the blue-footed boobies. We saw chicks. There's a couple. They actually did the booby dance for us. I didn't get any good photos of it, but they're everywhere. Interestingly, they're a diving bird. I tend to sort of think duck or something. And they dive from way up there. You can hear them hit the water a quarter mile away. I have no idea how deep they dive for fish, but they're moving when they hit the water. This guy's dancing a little bit, showing off, and obviously the blue feet. Then there were frigate birds. I've got about 4 pictures of these guys. It was interesting. We got on the boat, and a couple of them started hanging out on the boat. We all went nuts. By the end of it, we're like, 10 frigate birds, whatever. It's like being in a National Geographic documentary. We had them hovering over us, following along on the boat. This one's female because it doesn't have the great big honking red pouch. And we wandered around, and there were just dozens of these males all puffed up, trying to attract the ladies. And I'm thinking, I read about this in National Geographic when I was a kid. And there it is. And it was cool. So we went through, this was one of the days, was Frigate Bird Day. And here are 2 males. This guy scared the other one off. Right? Whatever he's got more of it. There were, I think, 4 species of heron we saw. There's a yellow-crowned night heron, a striated heron, a great blue, local bird. And one of my favorite pictures was a lava heron. We learned that almost everything there is either a Galapagos something, a lava something, or a Darwin something. Like they got 3 names, and that's it. These are a crab that, again, the first day we're like, oh my God, they're so pretty. We saw millions of them. They were everywhere. Sally Lightfoot crabs. And I happened to get that shot of everybody all lined up. You saw the waved albatross earlier. These are the ugliest bird when young. Oh my God, that's alive. Yeah, it's, wow. So ugly. Yeah. Even the gulls are pretty down there. Do you think seagull is? No, the swallowtail gulls were beautiful. And the ones, this is a juvenile over here. The cormorants are flightless. They've been out on the islands without predators for long enough. I mean, look at those wings. You can't fly with that. Right? They're, you know, the flight feathers are gone, things are vestigial, etc. They swim really well. I had one dive about this far from my nose when I was snorkeling one day. Went scooting right by me. But yeah, a bird that can't fly. We had terns, wandering tattlers, fairly common shorebirds. This was fun. Some fishermen pulled us alongside, and our crew bought some fish. And this guy's gutting them. And we had pelicans all around looking for the guts. We had frigate birds above us. We had a frigate bird try to take some fish guts out of a pelican's pouch. And there was a fight in midair that I unfortunately did not get a picture of. But yeah, oyster catchers, a fairly common bird. They had penguins. They had everything, right? They got killer whales, they got penguins. Yeah. And of course here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 Sally Lightfoot crabs just hanging out because they're everywhere. A whimbrel. And a couple of spots where we found flamingos and got to check out flamingos in the wild. Then of course we have the mockingbirds, Darwin's favorite bird. We saw 3 of the 4 species that were there. They all kind of look the same to me, I've got to admit. But we've got the Galapagos mockingbird here, a hooded mockingbird here, And a Chatham's mockingbird, there was a nest right behind here that we almost stuck our face in. It was so close, except that these are some really, really spiky. It's an acacia, wasn't it? That was in. And now, oh, pigeons, they're everywhere. There we go. The finches. Okay, they look like finches. All right. I take all these pictures and then I bring them back and go, what kind of finch is this? And we of course have the small-beaked ground finch, carefully differentiated from the medium-beaked ground finch, because the difference is obvious. Okay. Then we got into the small-beaked tree finch, which this was the best photo I had. The woodpecker finch actually has a different beak, and this will use twigs to dig grubs and things out. So they're actually a tool-using species for that one. Then we have the large-beaked cactus finch. There's somebody that was into finches that was like, I'm going to find as many species as I can. And I'm going to DNA test them to make sure that there's just enough. And we, of course, can't forget the warbler finch, which kind of looks more like a warbler to me than a finch. There was the yellow warbler. These little guys were everywhere and extremely cute, and obviously colorful. And the Galapagos flycatcher. My favorite picture, the vermilion flycatcher. This was one that apparently we were not supposed to see. That's pretty much, it's common out on the mainland as far as I can tell, but in the islands you don't see it like ever. And we happened to see this guy, and I got to have a camera that could reach out and touch. So, yeah. We're playing Frisbee. Except that the Frisbee she's holding is the disc inside a whale spine. You can see the whale skeleton in the background. We just popped one of the discs out and threw it back and forth for a while. You know, it's cartilagey, bony stuff. It was fairly light. We didn't get hurt too bad when we didn't catch it right. So, things to do on the beach. And, of course, a sunset picture. And with that, I burned barely half an hour. So, we have time for Holly.
So, the last time I gave a Darwin talk, it was about the evolution of sexually transmitted diseases. So this will be much better to look at. So, as Dr. Hickey mentioned, the Galapagos, you've got basically really dry areas and cloud forest. I'm going to focus on the dry areas because that's what there was the most of around here. Most of the landscape on a lot of these islands, you can see it's just basically lava. There were 3 species of cactus that you can find there. These are again, the lava cactus, which is typically the name here. We've got prickly pear cactus, which typically when you see these, or most of you, when you see them, they'll be, you don't see these big, huge, woody trunks that are associated with them. But here, they have land iguanas and tortoise that chew on them. So over time, they evolved these nice, thick trunks to protect themselves. The other cactus is Galapagos cactus. We didn't have too many lovely pictures of those, but this is an image of one that's fruiting, which made it interesting. So there's our cactus. Again, very dry area. The plants that live there have to be very tough. Usually you'll find them along these crevices where some water has seeped in. One really cute ones is this spurge that grows all over the islands. You can see it makes these lovely little flowers and so on. This was on Genovese Island, and these were scattered randomly about on the swell. Keeping with the naming scheme, we have Darwin's daisy. Again, very dry land species. You find it along these little cracks. Very lovely little flowers. Notice the flowers on these things. Most of what you'll see are yellow and white. They're sort of limited for pollinators, so the color scheme in these flowers is pretty limited. Then there's a variety of other plants, and here you can see the giant tortoise hanging out. Talk more about those in just a little bit. Again, on the drier areas, you see some of these lovely plants here, the Iguana, in a nice little white flower. Lots of species of Scalacia. This one has this nice, wonderful water storing capacity. Most of these plants did. The Galapagos cotton was really interesting. In this image, you can see in the background, there's very gray and dry, not too many leaves. The cotton on this Galapagos cotton was maybe an inch, inch and a half wide. You get up to the cloud forest, and here's what this plant looks like in the cloud forest. And this flower on this cotton plant was huge. And really, really impressive. The difference in what a little bit of water can do is just amazing. One of the most common trees on these islands were sandalwood, and these are kind of neat. When we got there, they were experiencing a drought, so there really hadn't been much rain in, over a year, is it? So things were quite dry, and sandalwoods lost their leaves pretty quickly. But if you can see in this image, it's not all that easy to see, but there's all these little kind of green puffs. These are all lichen, and the sandalwoods were covered in lichen, and the lichen were actually providing them with a lot of their nutrition and water during this period. So kind of a nice symbiosis there. And being in a dry area, I always associate dry areas with very prickly and nasty vegetation. Nasty in terms of what it can do to you, not in terms of its really cool ability to defend itself. Here we've got this acacia. It's got these lovely, lovely spines on there. You don't really want to walk through one of those. And another tree here, the Departme, Manzanella, also known as the poison apple tree. The branches, if you scraped along those, you get these nice inflamed welts. The apples themselves are poisonous. Unless you grew up in the Galapagos and are a tortoise or a land iguana, in which case those do just fine eating these poison apples. Now, one of the more interesting trees are these mangroves. So we've got the white mangrove, which was primarily growing on land, provided a lot of nice area for our roosting red-footed boobies. And here you can see a nice little red-footed booby, and there's one in the background here. And that fluffy white thing there is a chick that it's incubating. The black mangroves were primarily along the beach areas, and the red mangroves would basically grow on rocks and drop their roots into the water. Really, really impressive trees. And if you look really closely, you might be able to see this brown lump here. That brown lump is actually a sea lion. In the tidal change, it probably just crawled up there for a nap, and then when the tide went out, it was kind of stuck there until it came back in. One of the really nice things about wandering around the Galapagos is we weren't pestered by many insects. Really no mosquitoes. A couple of the islands had some horseflies, but as soon as if you were wandering in the water, as soon as you dried off, they went away. So being a tourist in that manner was kind of nice. The beetle diversity isn't great. There's about 20 species of beetle that are on the Galapagos Islands. They do have this really cool, the Galapagos painted locust. These were really pretty. Bob took this picture here. One of the things, so most of these pictures either Bob or I took. I'll let you know when one shows up that we didn't take. This is one that I lifted from the internet. The Galapagos has a giant centipede. We did not see one. So I was actually fine with that. The primary pollinator on the islands is the carpenter bee. And these things are about 2.5 inches long, maybe a little bit longer than that. You can hear them coming a mile away. It's not little bomber planes. But they do a really lovely job of pollinating all of those plants, and they key on the white flowers and the yellow flowers. So that's why all the plants around there have that. Okay, now for some of the bigger things that everybody thinks about when you think about the Galapagos. So the giant tortoise is certainly a draw here. There's only 2 places in the world where you find the giant tortoise. The other's on a small island off of Tanzania. The tortoise itself, so we've got this genus and species here, and then all of these other terms here are subspecies within this species. So there are lots of subspecies that basically evolved on these the different islands, and you'll notice each of these is sort of linked to a caldera. The tortoises basically lay their eggs in the coastal regions, and they spend their first 10 or 15 years down in those lower areas, and then slowly make their way up to the cloud forest areas where they grow to sexual maturity, which is for these tortoises about 25 years old before they start breeding. So, so they're rather slow to reach maturity. There's a variety of sizes that we came across. This one was actually pretty small. I probably could have picked it up. Still a couple feet in diameter, but smallish compared to some of these others. The adults for these tortoises can be anywhere from 300 to 900 pounds. So, so they're fairly large, and they're doing pretty well. There was a point in time where there were recorded somewhere around 250,000 of these critters scattered throughout the islands. In the 70s, that number was about 3,000. So they were knocked out quite a bit, but some rather aggressive conservation efforts brought them back. They're about 19,000 now, of a variety of different of those subspecies. On the previous slide, there were 15 subspecies that were listed. 10 of those are still around. 3 of them that they're calling subspecies, there were only single individuals that were described with each of those. So it's hard to say how populous those were to begin with. But the conservation efforts have been quite good. So these are still considered endangered, mostly because it's they're trying to control the human influence on the islands. But yeah, as we were driving along, you can see there's a tortoise here, there's a tortoise here, there's a tortoise here, and this is Maurice, our one of our naturalists, and he's poking it in the butt with a stick and trying to get it to off the road so we can get by. And this is an image of the cloud forest, and this is where you'll find these larger critters. There were 2 main shell types that you can see in the different subspecies. One of them, you can see the shell kind of comes up over the neck, and these are primarily for the ones that spend a lot of time up in the highlands and move up there because they're grazing on the ground. So the fruit that falls off the trees, they eat grasses, and a variety of other things. These, so the subspecies that have this, it's referred to as a saddleback, that's so that these turtles or tortoises can reach up and eat the stuff that's higher. So nice adaptation for them. This is a large adult. interesting, Bob took this picture, I took this one, and we managed to get the same pose in the tortoise. I'm not sure how we managed that, but we did. This is an adult. Okay, where's Stan? There's Stan. Here's your snakes. There are 2 snakes on the Galapagos. I admit I don't know much about either one. This one, I got lucky, I actually spotted this one for the group on Fernandina Island. This one pretty much made itself known because it was right in the middle of the trail on Espanola Island. Many folks will go to the Galapagos because they're interested in iguanas. These are land iguanas, so we'll be talking about marine iguanas in just a little bit. These land iguanas can get pretty large. They'll range anywhere from 2 feet up to 4 or 5 feet, depending on the reference that you're looking at. You can see they blend fairly well in these sort of dry forest areas. Let's see, these are considered vulnerable as far as their conservation status goes. They pretty much will eat those poison apple fruits and cactus. So the prickly pear cactus is one of their favorite snacks. When they're laying eggs, anywhere from 2 to 25 eggs in a clutch. So they've been fairly successful, and their numbers have been increasing, but they're still little tenuous. Now these little guys were fun. The genus here, Microlophus, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but there are 6 species within this genus that are found in the Galapagos. They were pretty much everywhere where we were wandering around. They eat insects. They're really good about cleaning up marine iguanas. So for all the insects that would pester the marine iguanas, there'd be these lava lizards that would be running over and eating all the insects that were pestering the marine iguanas. So Bob ended up with a couple pictures of the lava lizards on the marine iguanas with finches picking off what the lava lizards weren't getting. They are fairly gregarious. You know, you sit down, they come up, they'll check out. They're territorial. This was a really cute incident. We were at the Charles Darwin research station, and we see these 2 males, and they run up and they start wrestling. So I got this action shot here of them actually attacking each other. And then they sat in this pose. You can see them kind of pulling the skin here, and this one has the side, it's pulling the skin. And they just literally sat like that for a good 5 minutes, and we got bored and left. So I'm not sure who won it. but nice little critters. I didn't see anything about their conservation status, so I'm guessing that they're not threatened. I'm a microbiologist, so I had to put up a couple biofilm pictures. These are volcanic islands, so there's lots of sulfur associated with these islands. Hopefully the colors showed up on this. Got these nice green bands and then these nice purple bands. These are purple sulfur bacteria that creates this nice mixture here. On one of the islands, Santiago, see this kind of inlet here. Farther up on this rock, there was this nice little blowhole where the water would come flowing in and blasting up and then basically funneling back down. And it had the lovely name of Darwin's toilet. It did have the nice sulfury smell, and as you look down in, you can see this reddish stuff, and this is a close-up of the biofilm there. So thank you for bearing with the microbiologist talking about biofilms. Lots of critters around the island. Won't spend much time talking about these guys. As you move toward the water, these are things that you can find sort of in and out of the water. This little guy, I'm not sure what it is, but it was in the tide pool. And it looks good in the picture, doesn't it? We've got starfish, a 52-legged starfish. This one is called a chocolate chip starfish. Things actually really do look like chocolate chips. We've got some corals, some anemones. These are little baby conch. We've got the hermit crab. We've got the pencil spiny urchin. We've got another starfish. This is a dynamic starfish. And these little black things in here, those aren't, I mean, those are holes, but each of those has an urchin in it. So there's little spiny urchins in there. And it's not a coral reef, so the Galapagos doesn't have coral reefs, but they do have corals. And here you can see these lovely fan corals that are poking out. And as you snorkel around, you'll see a lot of those corals. The infamous sea cucumber. So this was what the kerfluffle was over, was the sea cucumber. And these were all images that I took. So these have a great little underwater camera, and spent a lot of time with it. Probably took 120 pictures a day. So it was a lot of fun. Just wanted to give a shout out to our naturalists, Maurice and Elizabeth. They were absolutely wonderful, really, really well-informed people who you could ask them very general questions, and at least for Elizabeth, if I asked her what a plant was, she could rattle off the Latin name for me very easily. So really, really well-informed folks. Sally Lightfoot crab, Bob already talked about this one. They were everywhere. Really, really lovely colors. When they're babies, they're these little dark things. And as they age, then they pick up their brighter colors. One of the interesting things is before they molt, they produce this surfactant material that kind of softens up the shell and lets them slide out, so they can get out of the old shell rather easily. Bob took this shot. There were lots of rays around the islands. With the exception of the two top and this bottom right photo, these were all taken with me hanging over the Zodiac. We were in a little Zodiac boat, hanging over with my camera in the water, taking these pictures. This is an eagle ray, and this tiny little thing here is actually a pufferfish. A thing that was just referred to as a stingray. I'm not sure what the specific name was here. This was one that got landlocked in a little tide pool. Same thing. This area here, I think this was on Fernandina or Isabella. One of those two. There was just a small beach, so basically from this spot here, what you see over here, absolutely loaded with rays. So this is in the surf that's coming up here. As you shuffle along, they would just scatter. It was really, really impressive. The Zodiac pictures, so these two were taken in Zodiac. This here is a spotted eagle ray. I don't know, you see the spots showing up? Not really. So it's all spotted under here. These really lovely spots on that eagle ray. And quite large. It was just a little smaller than the Zodiac boat. These, I did not take this picture. In the same day that we got these images, there was a huge herd of these things that was running around the Zodiac, but we were moving, and so I just put my camera in thinking that I'm going to take all these great shots, and all I got was cavitation bubbles. So it was a kind of an epic fail. But these are golden rays, and these are what I didn't get a picture of that day. All right, the marine iguanas. These things are something that you can find in the Galapagos and nowhere else. They diverged from the land iguanas somewhere around 8 million years ago. So they were actually developing before the current islands were there. Popped up around 5 million years ago. Here's a lovely image of a male. You can see he's got these impressive claws. Most of them are pretty well camouflaged. So in this image here, you can see him on the lava. These guys. Some here. And here they are all clinging to the cliff here. And this. You get an appreciation for why they need those lovely claws and why they have these lovely tricuspid teeth. It's to rip the algae up off of the rocks that they're attached to. So they're very well developed in their ability to do this. They have these great glands, so as they're doing this, they're swallowing a lot of salt water. So they've got these great glands that they've evolved. When they get back out of the water, they, I guess a more polite term is sneeze out the salt, but they're basically blowing out these large wads of salt when they come out. So whenever you see the sneezing iguana, you want to move away a little bit. But yeah, those claws, you can tell it's really hanging on there. There was some good current here. And he does pretty well eating. There's, let's see. I think there were 7 subspecies of these marine iguanas that basically were subspeciated based on island. There are lots of them, so you can see there's this nice population of iguanas here. There's one swimming. El Nino events tend to be pretty rough on these guys. The algae that they like to eat dies off fairly quickly. On Fernandina Island, where we saw these large packs of iguanas, literally you had to watch where you were stepping because there were so many. There were lots and lots of skeletons around, and that's where I got that image of the tricuspids. These things, they really aren't very many predators. The birds don't seem to pick them apart much, so the ones that are there were actually there from the last El Nino. In Floriana and Santa Cruz, we've got some more brightly colored marine iguanas. There's a male, there's a female hanging out behind him. So really, really interesting critters. And they are now considered vulnerable. They're, the estimates of their numbers range anywhere from 50,000 to 250,000, depending on the source that you're using. The Galapagos green turtle is somewhere between endangered and threatened. Really lovely creatures. As you're snorkeling around, there were lots and lots of these things. At the moment, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 breeding females that are on the islands right now. So it'd be a good idea to get those numbers up a little bit. But they seem to be doing reasonably well. So the populations weren't so much declining, it's kind of staying static, and we're hoping to see those go up a bit. The mammals that were on the islands, there were basically introduced species that they got rid of most of them. They're still having a rat problem. But really the only mammals that are significant in the Galapagos are the sea lions. And these are Galapagos Fur Seals. They're actually sea lions. The difference is the vertebrae in seals makes them kind of hop forward. They can't move their hips. Whereas the sea lions, as they move around on land, they can actually move their hips. This is the fur seal. They're an endangered species. They've got these great thick fur coats. This is a male who wanted this little hole area until he found out there was a much bigger male there. So he got chased out. This is a female, and these are some fur seal pups. There's a fur seal lounging in this crevice here. They raise one pup a year, but In lean years, the female might keep her pup around longer. Sometimes they'll take up to 3 years to wean them, even though they have more pups. So it doesn't actually work out that well for them. They tend to wear themselves out pretty quickly, so their numbers are declining. They are protected. Nothing is really hunting them at this point. They eat fish and cephalopods, but they tend not to go far out in the water. So predation by sharks and things isn't a big deal. El Nino events are, because then their food source drops. So they used to be hunted for their fur. That hasn't occurred for quite some time. But they are endangered. They are a lot of fun. Both the fur seals and the Galapagos sea lions, which will be the last one that I'll be talking about, really, really playful. When we came to this island, this is a fur seal and this is her pup, and the pup was just playing with this crab, flinging it all over the place, having a great time. This one swimming around with a piece of kelp, just waving it around like a little flag. This is a Galapagos seal pup, and as we were checking out all the iguanas and sea lions in this area, this pup crept up and finally grabbed the tail of the marine iguana and started tugging on it. They're pretty gregarious creatures. When you're in the water with them, they're not shy at all. They'll swim right up to you. They'll tug on your fins. They'll check you out, blow bubbles in your face. So they're a lot of fun. There you go. So very, very neat critters. These also have one pup a year. They're doing a little bit better than the fur seals, so their numbers are better. The Galapagos sea lion is also endangered, and that's what those were that were just swimming around. Here's a Galapagos sea lion with a pup. You see lots of them clumped on the beach. They like to hang out on the beach and just bask in the sun. What they will do with their pups is basically, as they have their pups, they'll collect them in large groups, and the mothers will go out to feed. Within about a week, their pups are getting in the water and learning to swim. And on Espanola Island, which is where we were watching the albatross, we came across this great little area. All of these are seal pups. And it was basically a nursery. There was one mama sea lion hanging out, watching the pups, and the rest were just learning to swim in this little protected area, and clearly having a good time. The Galapagos sea lion is one that eats primarily sardines. It tends to range a little bit farther. So the largest threat to those tend to be sharks and orcas. People activities, boating. We came across several sea lions that were missing fins and things that looked like they had just been lopped off by boats. So those are the largest threats to those. So probably the biggest threat are the Canadians. This was just a great image. The sea lions really don't care if you're around. They were laying there for quite a while, so these young gals from Canada plopped down, hung out with the sea lions. They looked over at them and went back to sleep. So, very, very gregarious, very lovely creatures. And with that, as I went over a little bit, we'll wrap it up. Happy birthday, Darwin. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody else. And yeah, so we've got some lovely images. If you have any questions for Dr. Hickey or I, we'd be happy to answer what we can. So thank you for your attention.